I'm going to see if I can speak. Now, if I break down, I can't speak. I'll just tell you that I think I can. So many people said so many things that reminded me of things, and it's funny. And yeah, you know, one thing that I got the idea to do just now when people were speaking is to introduce the caregivers that are here, because they were so central to our lives. And one of the original caregivers was Markpittsusa. If you would stand up, Markpittsusa. We always had the dream that Navarro and Markpittsusa and I were going to spend the rest of our lives together, you know. And Carol was, you've already spoken, but stand up, Carol. Carol was one of the original ones too, and we felt the same way about her. Rita, you were our original. I guess the three of you were the original ones, and then the ones now, is Annie still here?
Annie's out moving her car.
Oh, Annie's out moving her car, okay. And who else is here? Oh, Pam, of course. Where's Pam again? Stand up again. Oh, there she is, right. And somebody else couldn't be here, but they made our lives, thank you so much. They made our lives wonderful. If we had not had them, I think the workload on me would have been so great that I couldn't have appreciated Navarro at all. And I did have time to appreciate him and spend time with him and all of those kinds of things. And I have to comment on who was it that told the story about Navarro saying that I had a boyfriend, was the way he put it. And it was Carol's daughter that was taking care of Navarro that day, and I had lots of errands in the grocery store and all sorts of things. And so when I got home, she took me aside and she said, now, Navarro says you have a boyfriend. And she said, I told him, no, you don't have a boyfriend, that you're going to the grocery store. And he said, no, I knew it's a boyfriend. No, and so then a few minutes later he'd say, she's off to see her boyfriend again. So I got home and Carol's daughter explained that to me, and I said, oh, okay. And then I was busy and I forgot about it until the next day. And then I said to Navarro, did you tell Charlene I had a boyfriend? And he just started laughing. He thought he had pulled the best joke in the entire world, because he had her convinced, and she was trying to talk him out of it, that I had a boyfriend. But I was going to comment on something that John said, but I don't remember what, but maybe it was graveling the front yard. But anyway, we had a lot of adventures. When he said Navarro liked to shop, of course, where John was shopping was in building supply places. And so as John worked on the things at our house, he would go with John every time to ride with him. And I think Navarro honestly felt like he was building those things. He didn't know how to build anything, but he loved. I mean, one thing he did in our garage is he built a workshop for himself there, and he bought all these tools and things. And then every time John would go to buy something for the house, he'd go with him, and they'd talk and have a good time. But Navarro was, as everybody said, one of the funniest people in the whole world. He was always laughing. He was always having fun. He was playing jokes. The mean joke that he wouldn't play was on Markpittsusa. And it was Valentine's Day, and she was working that morning. And I said, Navarro, let's play a joke on Markpittsusa. And he said, okay, what should we say? What should we say? We were trying to think of some joke to play, and I said, oh, I know what you will do. She's going to come in a minute with your breakfast, and you look at her and you say, you're fired. And I said, then you say, April Fool. Did I say it was Valentine's Day? And I said it was April Fool's Day. April Fool's Day. Well, he played jokes on Valentine's Day too, but it was April Fool's Day. So then you say, April Fool, and Navarro said, no, I'm not saying that. And I tried to get him to do it. I told him several more times, and he wouldn't do it. And I asked him later, I said, Navarro, why wouldn't you do that and play that joke on her? And he said, I'm not saying anything mean to anybody. And so I thought that was so sweet. But he had the best sense of humor. He had such strong ethics and ethical principles about the things he believed in. Kelly, when I was here, Kelly is Mike Swing's wife, and many of you know Mike, and that Mike just died. But I was at his service, and as I listened to the many things that Mike believed in and worked on, it really reminded me of Navarro, because he was very strong in his ethical beliefs, and he stuck to them no matter what. And gosh, there are so many things he was passionate. He was passionate about music. He was passionate about cooking. He loved our dogs. The one thing I forgot to bring and put on the memorabilia table was a picture of his first dog, beloved Danny Boy. Oh, he loved that dog. He'd always wanted a dog, and he'd never had one as a child. And Navarro did grow up in a very bad, even brutal situation, and that's one reason you don't, I think that's the earliest picture of him, that's an early one too, but the one where he's graduating from high school, because there were no pictures, because nobody takes pictures of a child they don't want around. And somehow he had the character and courage, and I think you said this first, Paul, but really to turn his life around, because he told me when he was in high school he kept a gun in his locker, and I thought that was pretty extreme, and I said I wouldn't do that. He said, well, I don't want to, but everybody else has one. You've got to have a way to protect yourself. And a lot of the people that he was around in his early life, he told me about this, I didn't know him then, died or ended up in jail, but somehow he pulled himself out of that. And when you've had no positive influences, because he was a teenager or later, the older couple that's over on this table are the people he called his mom and dad, because his mom and dad didn't, they abandoned him early. And I don't know if you noticed in the obituary, I didn't mention his mom and dad by name. I didn't think they deserved a mention at all, but I mentioned his sort of adopted parents, even though he never lived with them. But that was later, late in his teenage lives, or when he was in his early 20s, I'm not sure which, and he'd already kind of pulled himself out, but somehow he pulled himself out of that. And I asked him one day how he did it, and he said, well, I was driving along after work. He used to work a late shift, and he said, I thought, my life is not the way I want it to be, and who's going to help me change it? And he said, I realized that nobody was going to help me change it, that nobody in the world was going to help me change my life. And so I decided that I better change it myself, and he did. And you know, it's funny, because I never would have been interested in him if I'd known the early rougher guy. I think I wouldn't have been interested in him at all. But he was such a wonderful person, but to me, the most important thing was the love that he had for people. And he had for all people. It didn't matter your color, your age, your nationality, or anything else, but he had a huge love for people, but especially for me. I always look back on it, and I loved him just as much, but I was not as demonstrative. Oh, he was always doing things for me, just always. If I was down about something, before he went to work, or maybe the night before, he'd go and he'd buy me little cards, greeting cards, and he'd hide them all over the house. So I would find them at different times, and maybe to cheer me up. And he was always doing things like that, just always. He just gave me more love than I think anybody else in the world has ever gotten in a relationship. And it was every day, and it was constant, and he changed my life. He influenced me in so many ways. I think he taught me to relax and to enjoy life, rather than always be, I don't know, trying so hard and everything. He taught me that you gotta relax and enjoy life. He always had fun and tried to be sure that I had fun. But that was what I appreciated most, was just the tremendous love that he gave to me all the time. And I keep hearing it reflected back, because everybody says, oh, the way he talks about you, the way he's always talked about you, and that sort of thing. I did want to comment on a couple of things that many of you didn't have a chance to read the obituary. It is here if you want one, but many people don't take the paper anymore. I said it 2 times that I know of. He had spent tremendous amounts of time. Lots of times he spent time helping people, but tremendous amounts of times that lasted over years, helping somebody who was very deserving but didn't have many chances in life. And the first time was when we lived in Birmingham, Alabama. And there was a little girl that I came to know, but she was a teenager, a little slip of a girl. I mean, she was tiny. She was a young black girl, and I guess it was a federal program they had where they go into poverty areas and and put people to work, and the federal program would pay the salary of the person, because he wasn't, I mean, he didn't hire people that were still in high school, but she would come to work after high school with him. And one day he came home and he said to me, Deborah's smart. He said, Deborah is really smart. And I said, oh, that's nice. And so before I knew it, he had taken her over to the university, and he had helped her fill out the application. I mean, she came from a family where she would never have known what to do, just really poverty stricken. She never, we found out later, she'd never sat down to eat at a table with people before. You just grabbed, if there was food in the refrigerator, you grabbed it out, you stood there eating it, and because then he got her hooked up with me, because I was at the university, so we wouldn't lose track of her. So he got her, I'm sure he paid her application fee, and he got her to apply for the university, and then he got her to apply for financial aid. And she went to the university. They helped her after she was there. She called over when her dad had called and said he really needed money, and he wanted her to give him the money she had for the rest of her term, and we said no, and or I didn't, but they said no and explained to her she better not do that. But anyway, when we left, she wrote us a letter out here and just expressing to him what he meant to her, and it was a great deal, but somehow we lost the letter, and we never knew how to find her. And then about 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, she called us and we talked. And she had graduated from college. Well, first of all, once she started at the university, Navarro turned to me, he said, okay, now you take care of Deborah. So we gave her a work-study job in our office and hooked her up with the person she was work-study for. She practically lived with her girls and stayed at her house a lot and learned a lot about how normal people live and that sort of thing. But anyway, she told us that she had graduated from college and she started work in the financial aid office, and she just retired, and she was assistant director of the financial aid office. And she said to Navarro, and I remember the words almost exactly, now remember this is Birmingham, she has a real southern accent, but she said, Mr. Faircloth, she said, one of my sons is a lawyer, and my other son is an accountant. My sons wouldn't have a nice life like this. I'm talking way too fast for the sound. If you hadn't helped me like you did. So he definitely changed her life. And the other person that, Jason's mentioned this, her brother, that changed our life in positive ways more than we changed hers, of course, was Summer. Because Summer became our daughter and is still our daughter. And there she is. And Navarro just spent so much time and absolutely adored her in every way, and just thought she was wonderful, which she is. We love her dearly, but to Navarro, she was everything. Just raise your hand so everybody sees you. The beautiful, beautiful girl in the room. And she's responsible for this. She's responsible for all of this food, and I mean, she took care of her supply and everything. And gosh, where's Debbie? Debbie made all the homemade cookies. There's Debbie, right back there. She won't raise her hand. Yeah, there she is in the back. I have to tell you one short story about Debbie. When we had our 50th anniversary party each summer, and her wonderful husband, Daniel, where's Daniel did? There's Daniel back there with the changing a diaper back there, yeah. Wonderful husband, I said, yeah. I wanted people to put something funny on their name tag at the 50th anniversary party. And what I wanted Debbie to put, because Debbie was Miss Alaska, and I wanted her to put, I was Miss Alaska, but Sarah came in second. I'm not sure Sarah was ever, but she wouldn't do it because she's so modest. But anyway, the other thing that I wanted to comment in the obituary, somebody asked me about this. It said that Navarro stood up for causes even when they were unpopular, and he had death threats. And what happened is in the newspaper he read about one of our legislators taking a position on something or pushing something that really Navarro didn't think was a very good idea. He thought it was a very bad idea if we do this, and so he wrote a letter to the editor of the newspaper. It was back when everybody took the newspaper, and he criticized this person and I guess suggested that people vote against him. Well, this legislator called Navarro up, And it's interesting who this legislator was. Do you remember, I know you all remember Birmingham Sunday, when the church was bombed and the 4 little girls were killed. And 3 of them were 11, but Denise was 9, and Denise McNair. And her father, Chris McNair, later did things in the city and went on to be a state legislator. And this was Chris McNair, the father of Denise, that called. And he explained to Navarro that the paper had misrepresented his view, and this was not at all what he was proposing. So Navarro sat down, wanted to set the record straight, and he wrote a letter to the paper and said that that would have been a misrepresentation. This is what the person was saying, and that people should definitely vote for him. He was really pushing. So anyway, but this guy, as you know, if you know, he was the father of Denise. He was a black man. So we got home, I don't know, maybe a week after that or a few days after that, and there was a death threat on the door. And I don't remember what it said, but he was gonna come, I'm gonna come kill you or something like that. And we just laughed about it. We should have reported it to the police, but we were sure they weren't gonna follow through. And then we came home again, and there was a second one. And that was the end of it. But that was, somebody asked me what that meant, but it was because he had supported Chris McNair, a black legislator, and some people did not think that was appropriate. I know there were a couple of other things I was going to say, but I have no idea what they are. So if anybody, this is not usually done this way, but if anybody has any questions, I'll take them right now.